Is the Bible true? The manuscript evidence. We've seen in the last video how the manuscripts for the Old Testament were carefully supervised by God through the scribes who dedicated their lives to passing along God's Word accurately. We have the proof from such discoveries as the Dead Sea Scrolls that despite thousands of years between manuscripts, there was 95% accuracy, with the other 5% being minor spelling variations or slips of the pen. When it comes to the New Testament manuscripts, written within just one generation of Christ's life and death, these could easily have been disputed by the people living at that time. And there were plenty, like Saul of Tarsus, that wanted them shown as false. But there were just too many people still living that had heard Jesus, watched his actions, saw his miracles, and knew the truth. It's remarkable that Jesus said, "I am the truth," and the truth won in the end. His life could not be set aside as a myth. But how do we know today, over 2,000 years later, that what we read in the New Testament about Jesus is reliable history? The manuscript evidence for any ancient literature is based on two things. First is the time span between when the author originally wrote the piece and the oldest manuscript that we have available to us. And secondly, it's based on the actual number of manuscripts that we have for that piece of literature. Before we look at what's available for the New Testament manuscripts, let's look at some of the classical literature that scholars accept as reliable. As you look at this chart of the classical authors, let me point out two things. First, the shortest time span between the original manuscript and our oldest manuscript is 800 years. And second, the greatest number of manuscripts that we have for these ancient writings is 20. Now let's look at what's available for the New Testament. As for the time span, John wrote his Gospel around 90 AD. The oldest New Testament manuscript we have is from John's Gospel and is dated 125 AD. Now that's only 35 years from the original. This means that there is virtually no time lapse to permit the facts of Jesus' life to be forgotten and replaced by mythical exaggeration. You can see this fragment for yourself in the John Rylands Library in Manchester, England. This fragment of John's Gospel is confirmed by three great manuscripts containing most of the Bible. The first is the Codex Alexandrinus in the British Library. The second is the Codex Vaticanus in the Vatican Library. And the third is the Codex Sinaiticus, held in 4 libraries around the world. All three of these manuscripts are dated from 350 to 450 AD. That's within 300 years of when it was originally written. This is earlier by far than the earliest manuscript for any of the classical authors, which you'll remember is 800 years. Now, how many New Testament manuscripts do we have today written between 130 and 1100 AD? Keep in mind that for classical literature, the largest number of manuscripts is 20. For the New Testament testifying to Christ's life, we have, as of 2020, a staggering 25,000 manuscripts written in various ancient languages. You can see that if the New Testament is not reliable history, then no ancient history can be trusted. If scholars are sure that men like Caesar, Plato, and Tacitus existed based on a few manuscripts, then we can be sure that Jesus existed based on thousands of early manuscripts testifying to his life. In the next 2 videos, I'd like to introduce you to the eyewitnesses who wrote about Christ's life and teaching.